mornings on Family Net radio and TV stations all around the country. May not just be me, but if you notice parents of teenagers that sometimes have a little tick like that, because it's a dicey job at best.
Yeah, nearly 24 minutes after the hour, we know that parenting is one of the most requested topics around here. So we have a teenage parenting expert. We want to welcome JosephGandolfo to our program. He knows all about teenagers. He's a speaker, a motivational seminar leader, and a coach to people like parents of teenagers. He's written The Great Teenage Myth. Joe, welcome to Mornings. We're so glad you could be in the studio with us. Okay. Your title of your book begs the question, what is the great teenage myth?
All right. Well, thank you, Larry and Lori, for having me here this morning. What is the great teenage myth? The great teenage myth, I've been working with teenagers for about 20 years.
And you don't have a nervous tick. That's amazing.
No, but I've got after 20 years, I've got it for my first teenager at home now. He just turned 13.
Oh, so you can put this into practice, huh?
Yeah.
Your day is coming.
Exactly. That's what they tell me. That's what they tell me. And I'm a storyteller, so through sharing story to try to teach with young people, the great teenage myth emerged about 10 years ago. My clients challenged the idea, the thinking, they helped the story grow and evolve. And the great teenage myth is really a story about who's in control of one's life.
But after 20 years and thousands of teenagers in different capacities, this seems to be pretty pervasive. And it not only exists inside of them, but when they go to the halls and they go to the classrooms and they hang out in the basements, they perpetuate what I call this great teenage myth. And we need to help them shatter it. Now
we've got a crisis and our young people are in danger.
And this myth, this great teenage myth that I believe exists, and it's really starting in kids, I think, 9 and 10 years old too, because they seem to be getting older, younger every day. I think this is a paradigm. It is a deep way of thinking, kind of like the world is flat.
What advice do you have for parents of teenagers?
I think one thing I'd like to share with parents is know that the word teenager and this concept of teen life and teen culture and the teen slang and the wardrobes, it's a fairly new phenomenon. We've only been calling kids teenagers since the 1950s. So I believe we're just getting our mind around teenage life, how to work with them, how to support them, what kind of opportunities to offer.
This word teenager never existed before the 1950s. Now think about that for a second. There was literally no word teenager. There was no teen life, no teen culture, no teen slang, no teen dress, no teen hair, no teen music, no nothing. The life of a young person was very different over the course of all of human history up until after World War II. Teenager never existed before 1940, 1950. There was no such thing as a teenager, no such thing as teen life, no teen culture, no teen slang, no teen hair, dress, nothing. And what went down after World War II was that peacetime, all the infrastructure was in place for the Industrial Revolution to mass-produce goods. All the soldiers who made it back out alive, they wanted nothing more. They had gone through, those young men had gone through a really wild time, 15 years of their life in terms of what they saw. They went through a war, Great Depression. Maybe they heard stories about their dad in World War I. It was very different than what the world our teenagers, now we label them, are growing up today. So all these adults wanted was peace. And they got the GI Bill, which gave them education and housing. They started to get jobs, factory jobs, white-collar jobs, and they wanted a better life for our sons and daughters like we do now. And so we put them off into schools, public education. That was really the foothold of what my kids are going to today. Really what happened within that was this is the first time we've herded these young people in mass like never before in history. And this is where the culture and the slang and all this began to emerge, and hence the word teenager. The way that kids play today, my kids, your kids if you have them, I met a young lady who's got a 10-year-old, she's got another one on the way. I would imagine most of you have children. The way most of you played growing up, the way that I played growing up, it's only been going on since the 1950s. I'm going to speak more about this in a few minutes. But what does that tell me? What do I offer by sharing that with you? It's this. I believe we get locked into structures, we get fixed on our ideas about teenagers, about young people, about the way it is. And from my perspective, history tells us that this is a new phenomenon, about 50 to 60 years old.
Prior to that, it was a very different life for a quote-unquote young person.
Well, what are the biggest mistakes that parents and teachers make with teenagers?
They can't shoot them, so
No, that would be good. I think what we can do is try to let go of our kind of stigma, our kind of perception that we all think teenagers are. They're much more than that, than just the typical teenagers as everybody kind of thinks when we say the word teenager.
So maybe there's some stereotypes about teenagers that people should drop?
I think in the teenage world, when we use the word teenager, they see it as a fixed structure. We're just teens. We'll grow out of it. You know, it's not going to hurt me right now, whatever this behavior, that behavior is. I mean, all teens do this. I'll get it together my junior year in school. I'll get it together once I go to college. You know, we'll grow up, and they see it as this fixed structure. And I think that's detrimental. On the parent side of it, and the adult world side of it, teachers, society, us parents, when we default to, well, they're just teens, I think that's limited too, because we see them in that fixed structure. And it's not fixed, it's fluid. History shows us that. So I believe, my theory, is how we shift what I call a major crisis we have on our hands and our young people are in danger, is we have to reshape what it means to be a teenager.
So I believe the way we get these kids out of this fear that we have and this incredible worry and this crisis is we have to envision and create and craft, and that's the beauty of this. Different structures, different ideas of what they can be. I think that's the only way we get them through this crisis. So keep that point in mind, and that gets into the forecasting and the power of intention. Don't get locked into these structures and these ideas and these images.
If I were to guess, I'd say it's probably the most challenging time in anybody's life. I mean, emotionally, you're going through all kinds of changes. Physiologically, hormonal changes, you know, growth, you know, the dropping of the voice. You know, I don't know, it's just a time when there are so many, culturally, there's so many pressures on teenagers growing up. You know, do they give into the peer pressure? Do they follow the magazines or the TV shows? I mean, there's just so much information coming in that they have to process and turn around and try to be, you know, quote unquote normal kids. It's got to be the toughest time for any young person.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's, you know, it's much tougher than when we were growing up with the technology, media, influences, all that. So, yeah, it's an incredibly changing time. I believe they're hungry for something new. They don't quite know what they want sometimes, but they do want opportunity. They want to be heard. They want to exercise their sense of power in their life. And how do we do that as adults? Support them as parents, one. How do we do that as educators? How do we do that as a community, society? So I say this to you with love. When you walk into schools in the morning and you go home this evening and you work at engaging these kids, check in with you to see what you're thinking and how you view them.